If you told me a year ago that I'd be sitting in a lawyer's office waiting to hear whether my family had cut me out of the will, I would have said you were crazy. I grew up believing that family was everything. We were the kind of family that had Sunday dinners, took vacations together, and sent group texts about every little thing. But underneath the surface, there were cracks. Cracks that started small and grew wider with every passing year. My name is Maya, and I'm the youngest of three. My older brother, David, was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, whose mistakes were excused as boys will be boys. My sister, Sarah, was the peacemaker, the one who tried to keep everyone happy, who never rocked the boat. I was the outsider, the one who asked too many questions, who didn't fit the mold my parents had in mind. It started when my grandfather passed away. He was the glue that held us together, the one who made sure everyone had a place at the table. When he died, everything changed. My parents became distant, my siblings started fighting over money, and I felt like I was watching my family fall apart from the sidelines. I tried to stay out of it. I didn't care about the money, I just wanted my family back. But it wasn't that simple. My parents started making comments about who deserved what, about who had been there and who hadn't. I knew they were talking about me. I'd moved away for college, built a life in another city, and didn't come home as often as they wanted. They saw it as a betrayal. I saw it as survival. The tension grew with every family gathering. David and Sarah would whisper in the corner, my parents would give me the cold shoulder, and I'd sit there wondering what I'd done wrong. I tried to talk to them, to explain that I loved them, that I wasn't trying to hurt anyone, but it didn't matter. They'd already made up their minds. Then, one day, I got a call from my mother. Her voice was icy. "We're meeting with the lawyer next week to go over the will. You don't need to come, it's just a formality." I knew what that meant. They were going to cut me out, to punish me for living my own life. I hung up, shaking with anger and hurt. I called my sister, hoping she'd be on my side. But Sarah was noncommittal. "It's not about you," she said. "Mom and Dad just want to do what's fair." I laughed bitterly. Fair? Since when has anything in this family been fair? I spent the next few days in a fog. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus at work. I kept thinking about all the times I'd been there for my family. The birthdays, the hospital visits, the late-night phone calls. Didn't any of that matter? Or was it all about who lived closest, who showed up for Sunday dinner, who played the part they wanted? The day of the lawyers' meeting arrived. I almost didn't go. I didn't want to sit in that room and watch my family pretend that I didn't exist. But something inside me wouldn't let me stay away. I put on my best dress, held my head high, and walked into the office like I belonged there. Because I did. The room was tense. My parents sat on one side, David and Sarah on the other. The lawyer, a kind-faced woman named Miss Harris, greeted me warmly. "I'm glad you could make it, Maya," she said. I could feel my family's eyes on me, judging, waiting for me to break. Miss Harris began to read the will. It was all very formal, legal language, lists of assets, instructions about who got what. My parents were named as executors. David was left the family business. Sarah got the lake house. I sat there, heart pounding, waiting for my name, but it never came. I felt the blood drain from my face. I wanted to stand up, to scream, to demand an explanation, but I stayed quiet, determined not to give them the satisfaction of seeing me cry. Then, just as Miss Harris was finishing, she paused. "There's one more section," she said, looking directly at me. "This part was added by your grandfather before he passed away." The room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, a mix of shock, annoyance, and, from my parents, something like fear. Miss Harris unfolded a handwritten letter. The paper yellowed at the edges and began to read in a soft, steady voice. "To my granddaughter Maya, I know our family isn't perfect. I know you felt like an outsider, like you had to choose between being yourself and being loved. I want you to know that I saw you. I saw your kindness, your strength, your courage to live your own life. I'm proud of you, even if others can't say it out loud." My hands were shaking. I looked at my parents, who were staring at the table, refusing to meet my eyes. David shifted in his seat. Sarah bit her lip. I could tell they hadn't expected this. They'd thought they could erase me from the story, but my grandfather had made sure his voice would be heard. Miss Harris continued. I leave to Maya the trust fund I set up for her, education, to be used however she sees fit. I also leave her the cabin in the woods, where she spent so many summers with me. I hope she finds peace there and remembers that she is loved. I couldn't breathe. The trust fund was worth more than I'd ever imagined, enough to pay off my student loans, to start a business, to build the life I'd always dreamed of. The cabin was my sanctuary, the place where I'd learn to fish, to read, to dream. It was the one place I'd ever felt truly safe. The room erupted into chaos. My dad demanded to see the documents, insisting there must be a mistake. My mom started to cry, saying it wasn't fair, that I didn't deserve it. David was furious, accusing me of manipulating our grandfather, of turning him against the family. Sarah just sat there, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "I'm sorry, Maya. I didn't know." Miss Harris remained calm. These were your grandfather's wishes. They're legally binding. If you have any questions, you can take it up with the court. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my voice strong. I didn't ask for this. I never wanted to fight over money. I just wanted to be part of this family. But if you can't accept me for who I am, then maybe it's better this way. I left the office without looking back. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but I felt lighter than I had in years. For the first time, I was free. Free from expectations, from judgment, from the constant need to prove myself. The days that followed were a blur. My parents called repeatedly, leaving voicemails filled with anger, guilt, and desperation. David sent me emails demanding I do the right thing and give up the trust fund. Sarah reached out, apologizing again and again, begging me to talk to our parents, to try to fix things. I took time for myself. I went to the cabin, spent days hiking in the woods, reading by the fire, and remembering my grandfather. I let myself grieve the family I'd lost, the family I'd never really had. I cried, I raged, I wrote letters I never sent. And then, slowly, I started to heal. I used the trust fund to pay off my debts, to invest in my future, to support causes I cared about. I started a small business, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought possible. I made new friends, built a community, and found joy in the simple things. My family didn't give up easily. They tried to guilt me, to shame me, to turn the rest of the family against me. But I stood firm. I knew who I was, and I knew what my grandfather had seen in me. I was done apologizing for living my own life. Slowly, the calls and emails stopped. My parents retreated into their own world, David moved on to other fights, and Sarah, sweet, broken Sarah, started to find her own voice. She visited me at the cabin, and we talked for hours about the past, about the future, about what it meant to be family. I realized that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes it's about the people who see you, who believe in you, who love you even when it's hard. My grandfather had given me that gift, and I was determined to honor it. The months that followed were both lonely and liberating. I spent more time at the cabin, learning to enjoy my own company. I planted a garden, fixed up the old porch, and even adopted a dog from the local shelter. I found peace in the quiet, in the sound of the wind through the trees, and in the knowledge that I was living life on my own terms. Sarah became my closest confidant. She visited often, bringing coffee and stories from home. We talked about everything: our childhood, our parents, the pressure to be perfect. She admitted that she'd always envied my courage, my willingness to walk away when things got toxic. "I wish I'd stood up for you sooner," she said one night, tears in her eyes. I hugged her, telling her it wasn't too late to start. My business started to grow. I poured my energy into it, building something that wasn't just successful, but meaningful. I hired people who'd been overlooked, who'd been told they weren't enough. I donated to local charities, sponsored community events, and made sure my grandfather's legacy lived on in every decision I made. Sometimes I'd see my parents in town. They'd look away, pretending not to notice me. It hurt, but it didn't break me. I knew they were hurting too, hurting from the loss of control, from the realization that they couldn't shape my life anymore. I hoped that one day they'd find peace, that they'd learn to love me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. David was another story. He sent the occasional email, usually filled with anger or demands. He blamed me for dividing the family, for taking what wasn't mine. I stopped responding. I knew I couldn't change his mind, and I refused to let his bitterness poison my happiness. As the anniversary of the will reading approached, I found myself reflecting on everything that had happened. I thought about the girl who'd walked into that lawyer's office, scared and alone, and the woman I'd become, strong, independent, unafraid to stand up for herself. I decided to host a gathering at the cabin, inviting friends, neighbors, and any family who wanted to come. I didn't expect my parents or David to show up, but I wanted to create a space where people felt welcome, where no one was left out. Sarah helped me plan, and to our surprise, my mom called the day before the party. She sounded nervous, unsure. She said, "I know we haven't been fair to you. I miss you. I miss having a family." I felt a mix of hope and fear. I told her she was welcome, but that I needed her to accept me for who I was. She promised to try. The party was beautiful. The cabin was filled with laughter, music, and the smell of homemade food. My mom arrived with a plate of cookies, looking older but softer. She hugged me, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I'm sorry." I hugged her back, feeling years of pain start to melt away. Sarah and I stood on the porch that night, watching the sunset. She said, "You did it. You built a life you love." I smiled, knowing she was right. I'd taken the worst moment of my life and turned it into something beautiful. As the party ended, my mom pulled me aside. She said, "Your grandfather would be so proud of you. I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." I thanked her, knowing that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about choosing to move forward. I realized that family isn't just about blood or legal documents. It's about the people who show up, who love you even when it's hard, who celebrate your successes and help you through your failures. My grandfather had seen that in me, and now, finally, so did I. The days after the party felt like a new beginning. My mom started calling more often, sometimes just to chat, sometimes to apologize again for the past. She never asked for money, never tried to guilt me. She just wanted to be part of my life. Sarah and I grew even closer, sharing secrets, dreams, and the kind of laughter that only sisters can understand. David never came around, but I learned to let go of the need for his approval. I realized that some people will never change, no matter how much you hope they will. I stopped waiting for an apology that would never come, and instead, I focused on the people who loved me for who I was. The cabin became a place of healing, not just for me, but for everyone who walked through its doors. I hosted holidays, birthdays, and quiet weekends with friends. I watched as the garden bloomed, as the walls filled with photos of new memories, as the pain of the past faded into the background. One evening, as the sun set over the trees, I sat on the porch with Sarah and my mom. We talked about grandfather, about the lessons he'd taught us, about the importance of choosing yourself even when it's hard. I realized that I'd taken the worst moment of my life, the day my family tried to erase me from the will, and turned it into a story of resilience, forgiveness, and love. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt like an outsider in your own family, know that you're not alone. Sometimes the greatest gifts come when you least expect them. Sometimes being read last isn't an insult. It's a reminder that your story isn't over yet. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, please like, subscribe, and share your own story in the comments. You never know who you might inspire.